Hey, what's up? So I will talk about the basics of validation um, in Koa and this package we installed, the routing controllers. So if you scroll down here in this section, you will see auto validating action params, and just scroll a little bit down. So you should read this. It's really it gives you a lot of good information. But basically, you will define a class. We already did in the entities. If you think about it, we can use the same thing, and we will decorate our properties with some decorators from the class validator package that we installed. And by just defining the type in the routes, validation will happen. And when there is an error, a request or a JSON will be returned. An error message will be returned to the client when there is an error. So we just need to do this, which is very nice. But I think, it's okay. I closed something I already showed you. But there is this issue that the routing class and the class validator does not work. So this guy actually used it manually. But if you scroll down, a lot of suggestions what to do. But one of them is to downgrade the class validator. I did that. It did not work with me. Actually, you can read it. I'm not sure if this even worth it. We can just run it manually. This will give us like this. This will give us more insights on how we can customize things, I believe. Maybe if you want to just make the controller do everything, you can just read this, or maybe you can find a solution, but I don't think it's really that important. I mean, the line to validate things or the code to validate things is not that hard or not that big, so you need something like this. You don't need it. But let's just go through that. We will actually have to modify a couple of files in our case. So first thing, I will go to the users entity, and I will import a couple of things from the class validator. I will actually just put here import. I will put an empty object. I'm not sure if this is an empty object. This is the structuring syntax. This will create variables from the class validator. So first thing, the way I think about the entities when I use a class validator is like this. So is the ID something the user will send in the body of the request, not the URL, the body? If not, what I will do, I will put at is empty and pass always to true, and message will be do not send the ID. So what this will throw an error whenever the user sends the ID in the body of the request. Always means always this should be an empty, no matter what the group of the validation are. And we will come to the group of validations in the next video. But if you click control and then hover over this and click it, you will see that always indicates if validation must be performed always, no matter the validation groups used. Validation groups are basically should I validate this on post or on put or patch. So the way you validate data will change if the user tries to create the entity or tries to update it or delete it. The validation will change. For example, the user will only send the first name on update, so he is only updating the first name. So you don't need to force him or her to send you the other data with it. So the validation on update will be different from create. I hope this is clear. But I like to this is empty, just means that if the user send that, just throw an error. You don't need to send it. You might don't want to add this in your case, but I will just add it as an example. if you want to specify something that the user should not send, or the front-end engineer. Yeah, this. Now for the first name, it will be at is defined. This means that this property in the JSON object, when the user tries to send data, should not be null or undefined. Now is string, like this. This means that this data type should be string, and the screen just froze. Okay, and now min length 1, and at max length maybe 255. I'm not sure. And actually, any you can always pass an object that have these things. And here I think you can pass, or maybe one then pass an object. The message is to override the error message. Most of them are really good, so I only overrided this. Should be do not send. So these the same validators here as well. And now for the date, this should be is date string, like this. This means that this will be a string, but it's a date in the date format, and this will be let me show you what this date validates, or what this decorator validates. If you go to any console in JavaScript, to the console in the browser, and put to date, new date, then to ISO string, so it requires something like this. In class validator, if you want to only validate dates, you need to create a custom validator, which I will do. I will create two custom validators, one for this kind of format in the string dates, and the second one for validating if we already have the email, which means we will connect to the database, which is very interesting, and I think you will definitely use something like this in your application. A custom validator that talks with the database for a specific reason. So let's just continue. So these are the idea behind decorators. You will just decorate it and then validate it with a function called validate from the class validator, or it should be this routing package that we installed should handle that with the post and patch and get decorators after you define types, but it does not at the moment. Okay, so now for the email, there's a nice decorator called is email. By the way, they usually check for emails by a regex, regular expressions, and now is defined, which means it should always be there. Now for the user type, I will just put it as the ID for now. I mean, the user by default should not use send that. Do not send the user type. In your case, you don't maybe want to send an error message when the user returns when user sends anything. It depends on your application. Some applications just throws an error that something went wrong. Some applications should return that. I mean, it depends on your application and who are you working with. Now the password is just like like the first name. So just copy paste. So is a string is defined min and max length, so between 6 and 25, and the salt should be is empty, as the same thing. Do not send the salt. And that's it for the validation. There's so many things in the class validator, and I think one of the interesting things is the validator groups. I will go over that, and the custom validators. I think one of the custom validators that would be very interesting to implement is the between dates. So for example, if the user is submitting a date, it should be only in a specific range. Okay, so now let's go to our user controller. Now we already defined a type for this, but we need to validate it. Like I said, this routing controllers should already do that for us, I believe, via these post or body, and yeah, it should do this, but it does not at the moment. So what we will do, we will first thing create the instance of the user using the TypeORM helper function create, validate that instance. If there is no errors, we will proceed with our usual work. So what I will do, I will go to the base service. I will create some modifications. So first thing, I will create a helper function that just returns this, because we will use it in multiple places. So get instance. It will accept a data. It's a deep partial of t, which is our generic type, and it will return a deep partial of that t, and just return this to repo to create data. And what I will do here, I will just call this dot get instance data. Yeah, and I'm not finished here, but let me go now to the user controller. What I will do, I will call that function here. So const instance will be equal deep partial of our user entity, and this dot user service dot get instance, and pass it the user data that the client sent. Now let's just store the validation result in this. So this will await the validate function and give it the instance, and this validate function comes from the class validator, and just give it this instance, which is an instance from the user entity, and it's smart enough to understand that since this object is an instance from the user's entity, I will use these decorator rules or these rules to validate it, to validate the properties. So what I will do, and this actually the return type is an array, and array accepts a generic type. It's from the validation error, and it's also from the class validator. This is an interface that holds all of these properties. So now if the length of that array length is bigger than 0, which means we have errors, so let's just throw the validation result, which will just return an array of errors. Now if everything is fine, I will store the salt in the instance and the password in the instance. I will use the salt from the instance since I stored it there. Then when we called the create previously, we will create the instance, but we already did that. So what I will do, I will send a conditionally argument here. I will define a conditional parameter here. So entity already created, and this is conditionally, and it's from type deep partial. So if you already have the entity, you can just give it to me. I won't call this function again, so I won't repeat your steps. What I will do, if we have it, assign it. If we don't, assign this. This is how I will do it. This means basically, if this evaluates, or at least becomes, you can think about it, if this becomes false, or something that could be considered falsy in JavaScript, which is undefined empty object. No, sorry, yeah, undefined, not empty object, undefined empty string, null, false. I'm pretty sure there is a couple, maybe two other, but if this is undefined, which means you did not pass it, I'll just call this function. So if you pass it, I'm assuming that you already called this function at some point and passed the result to me. So now I will pass the user and then the entity, or the instance in our case. Maybe I did something not. I think this is fine. We don't actually need to pass anything here in this case. Yeah, we can just pass null. We don't need to pass anything. yeah, I'm not sure. Don't think this is a good idea, but yeah, it's fine. You can change it whatever you like. And at the end, let's just not console log. Let's just return the awaited result. Yeah, I think that's it. That should be it. So let's just run everything. Let me go to the package JSON, and for this div, let me just put go to source app.ts, so we don't need to type it again. So npm run div, and this will go to this path, which is very nice. Do I have postman? Yeah. Okay. Hold on just 1 second. Yeah. It will keep hanging out for a second. So yeah, it's run. So let's go to localhost 3000, then users, choose the post request, go to body, choose raw, and choose JSON. I already saved time, and I have this this object I will send. Remember that I have an ID in the object, and we are required the user to do not send the ID. If he send the ID, we will return an error. So let's just send the ID and the data with the ID and check what will happen. And just bear with me, my machine is very slow. So we already sent it, but let's just send it again. So as you can see, we have now an array. Yeah, we have an array, and we have the target. This is the data that you sent, and this is the constraints. This is the errors. So it's empty. Do not send the ID. This is the message we had. Let's now just remove this. Now send it. This is fine. So we will see that everything. We will see the user without the password and the salt that we excluded, if you remember. Now let's just remove the last name. For example, send. You will see an error for the last name that all of these constraints exist. So it's defined, happened, max length happened, everything happened. We can actually have many errors, or yeah, but yeah, they will return this way. So these are the basics of validations. But one thing to remember, I hope I will create a video about it, about the custom validation for the email, since it's unique. So we already have this email in our database. So let's send it again. See the error will happen. What will the error be? So use SQL constraint, unique constraint failed users.email. So first thing, this is not JSON. I'm not sure what this type. I think it's just a string. Yes, it's just a text. So first thing, if you want to everything this controller returns as JSON, which is very nice, you will use the JSON controller decorator, not the controller. This will return everything as JSON. So let's just now go. This is what I think you will usually use. Let's now just go and send. Or maybe if you are just dealing with JSON, you will use this JSON controller by default. If you are dealing with maybe binary, you are returning files so the client can download them, you will use maybe the controller. So since we are dropping everything when we are creating the database, this user does not exist, so the database creates it, or the API creates it. Now let's just send it again and see what will happen. Since we're returning everything as JSON, just look at this. So this is the error from TypeORM. Oops. So as you can see, we have everything. We have the query itself. Now check the parameters. We have the ID and the salt, which is very bad. Not ID, the password and the salt, which is not a good idea to have. So my idea was, if we implemented the custom validator, this won't happen. We will return a valid error message that we already have a user with that email. But just in case these things happened, you can go to, I didn't test it, but I'm pretty sure this is the solution. If you just again, if you didn't understand this, the problem that the password returned to the client, and we don't want that. You can actually maybe this, I think the logger here, you can define a custom logger. and you'll put it here some rules. Maybe if something like this happened, an error message, you will put the error in a log file and just return a generic error message, especially on production. In production, don't return this kind of things to the user. Just return them a generic error message and store the original error in a log file. Actually, I have a video on my channel about custom loggers in TypeORM if you are interested. But yeah, for this error, this is how we can solve it. And yeah, this is just the basics of validation. It's really simple, especially this function, and this returns a promise. Yeah, and I know this. I think this one is not that good. You can actually yeah, I'll just leave it. I mean, it's really not that important. You can do whatever you like. But I think just to show you an example is a good idea. Yeah, thank you.